Welcome back to The Long Shortcut, the podcast where two founders, Owen, myself, and James, talk through what it really takes to build, to scale, and sometimes to sell a startup.
Absolutely. So this week, something a bit different. We are joined by somebody who's lived all three of those chapters. Jan Jonker. He's the co-founder of Ubimax. They were acquired by TeamViewer, and they became a major part of the AI and industrial strategy.
Indeed. So we're going to be talking to Jan about what it takes to build a deep tech startup in Europe and what the acquisition process really looks like from behind the scenes. And we're all very curious, what's life like on the other side, going inside a much bigger organization?
Yeah, it was a really, really great discussion. And, Jan shared all sorts of things from what he learned along the way, from what he learned on the journey, and what his next chapter is as an investor now that he's on the other side. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so welcome, Jan, to the Long Shortcut with Owen and myself. Really great to have you here. I guess just a really kind of brief way to start. Just tell us a bit about yourself and what do you do?
Hey, good to see you again, James. Owen, hi. My name is Jan. I'm 43 years of age, living in Germany, as you probably can tell from my accent.
Guten Tag.
I guess how we met was I founded a startup in the past, co-founded a startup together with two colleagues. And that's also the journey I think that we're going to talk about today. That's where we met also. Before that, I met my co-founders at a consulting company. So I was doing some IT strategy consulting at Arthur D. Little. And that was actually my first job after university. Was studying here in Germany at the University of Mannheim, business together with computer science. Followed by, or in between that, I did an MBA in the US for 1 year. Went to school before that. Actually, I was a professional badminton player in my past years before I co-founded the company. But that's a long time and many kilograms ago.
Yeah, I could relate. Oh wow, that's that. It sounds like you went. I think there's quite a common path when you see a number of founders. They say ex McKinsey, ex Accenture, that kind of thing. What was it always in the path going through the consulting Arthur D. Little route to become a founder? Was that like already planned out, or did that kind of happen accidentally?
Oh, it wasn't planned, but I think at consulting companies you meet many people that are that don't want to be in consulting forever. You also learn how to create nice looking PowerPoint slides. One of the key skills you take away from consulting, which is an important skill. So making fun of it now, but I think that's one of the most important skills when you when you found a company, that you know that you have the right skills to show what you plan, what you're doing, and PowerPoint and related tools nowadays are a very important way to do that. Yeah, but I think key thing is you meet many people that are open for different jobs, different roles, and some are open to found their own business. So I was lucky enough to meet two guys at that same consulting company, Percy and Henrik, my two co-founders. We were on various projects together. All three of us were in the IT strategy department of Arthur D. Little. When you are having those consulting roles, you are often that's obviously you're traveling there. You are there for 4 to 5 days a week, which gives you much time over a beer and dinner and and a couple of cocktails to talk about what you want to do next, to brainstorm what are business ideas. So that's what we did, and that's how we ended up eventually founding a company.
I can fully relate to ideas being formed over beers. So Jan, I'm curious. We've talked about ideas being cheap on a previous episode, and what I find fascinating is the fact that you guys came together as a founding team nearly before you had the idea, if I understand it correctly, and then started brainstorming what was the idea going to be and what were you going to develop together. Is that the correct path you took?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, we had before we founded the company, we had, as I said, brainstorming. I think we had we had something where we had written down 50 plus ideas of what we potentially could do. But when we founded the company, we first continued doing consulting, and which made us some good money. That's the other thing why. So when you are in consulting, specifically at the beginning of your career in consulting, the consulting company gets a pretty high daily rate for you in strategy consulting specifically. Your salary is probably paid off after I don't know, half a month of the year, your full year salary. um, so that's the other thing where when you try to think, okay, can I do something which is more worthwhile for myself. Um, uh, when we founded, our idea was eventually to go into a product section. We had something around, I say it was, I don't remember exactly. We also don't have that paper anymore, but I think we had 40, 50 ideas on there. Some very stupid, strange ideas, some rather professional ideas. But we first continued the strategy path, got some nice engagements, and we used that for bootstrapping and also testing out some ideas in the course of that business. And eventually, one of those ideas, so I think we really kind of developed stuff and tested stuff for. We founded that in 2011, July 2011. The ultimate company was then founded, Ubimax was founded as a subsidiary end of 2014. So what is that, 3.5 years? So I think after 3 years, we started working on that specific idea, which was on the paper from the get-go. But then
Oh,
I guess we're going to talk about it, but some things happened in the environment, which led us to believe that that might now be the right idea, and it's worthwhile investing a good portion of our consulting money into that idea. So yeah, but indeed we found it without having that one thing nailed down, and but which was good. As said, we were able to generate our own bootstrapping money with the consulting engagements we had.
So that's quite sounds like quite a rare way of going about it. Then the founding team came together first, and then the idea appeared at the end of that. So was there a point that the three of you all sat down and said, yes, we're going to do a business now, here's what we're going to do? Or was it just more kind of casual conversations, and when the idea started to kind of drop, did it start to solidify more?
It was indeed more. It was a bit by chance. I mean, we did not even have the super concrete plan, to be honest, to found that consulting company. We all were, I think, at Arthur D. Little something between 2 and 4 years, different for each of us. And we didn't really, when we terminated our job at the consulting company, we didn't have the very concrete plan even to found that consulting company. Obviously, when you terminate your job, you have some period where you still continue working. Hence, we got to know that all of us became free at a very similar point in time. Um, and in Germany, for if you found a company at that time, I have to admit I don't know right now, but at that time, I think it's similar today still. You have for a full year, you could hand in a business plan, and then for almost a full year, you get some decent money actually as a subsidy for founding something.
interesting.
For if you do it the right way for every person that is part of that company. So that's what we did, which brought us another year, where we didn't have to make too much money to to cover our living, which was at that point in time anyway rather low requirements before kids and everything. But yeah, so it was indeed a very non-concrete way of founding a company. Yes, if you compare that to probably most ventures that are being set up, yeah, which often is from the get-go super strategic with a very concrete plan. Then that plan often is adapted, obviously, as you move along. Yeah, we started very easygoing, I'd say. We're quite convinced of kind of our skills that we are able to make money, and that's I'd say how we started.
Brilliant. I love it. So, Jan, I love the idea of having that short list and spending plenty of time teasing through many different ideas. What was it that sort of allowed you to zone in on what became Ubimax as a business? What about that idea? Was it a particular problem you were trying to solve? Was it something you were looking to bring to the market? And with that idea, how did you know you'd found product market fit with it?
Yeah, we had different things on the list, actually. We had technology things on the list, and we had things on the list of, as you put it, of problems that we thought should be solved by someone. One of the problems we thought that should be solved by someone was, at that point in time, I mentioned we had kind of dinner. As a consultant, you have dinner almost every night. You need to eat something, obviously. We realized most of the restaurants we went to had nothing electronically, digitally to serve people. So that was one of the ideas on the list, not the one we did eventually. We looked into it, and then we saw there are actually a couple of startups that had already started. So we talked a bit to them, thought about investing, which we ultimately, due to different reasons, didn't do. But so we had those type of things on the list, but we also had technology stuff on the list. And one of the technology things that we had on the list was wearable computing. Why was that on the list? Because Henrik, my co-founder, he was studying computer science and did his PhD in the area of wearable computing. And he was studying at the University of Bremen and also did his PhD there. And his the second professor that graded his PhD thesis was Professor Thad Starner from Georgia Tech in Atlanta. And Thad Starner was hired by Google as the technical project lead to develop the very first Google Glass device. So we got aware rather early on in the process that something is going on there with regards to the device. That's when we started looking into it. I think that was sometime in must be 2013, maybe it was beginning of 2014. That's when we looked at Henrik's code from the past, which was obviously quite outdated. That's when also Percy and myself looked at some of the devices. Like I think Epson devices were out there. How was that device called? Micro Optical was one of the devices that we had out there, which was just a displaying unit which you had to attach to a PC essentially. And Copin, GoldenEye were devices that were at the university that had been used by Henrik also, some of them at his own PhD study. We had videos in the background with main brands, Skoda, EADS, and so on, where Henrik and some peers from him, when he did his PhD, where he did studies which were quite successful. But at that point, when he did his PhD, you still had a backpack on your back with a large PC in there. And you were limited in terms of movement and also duration of how to use how long you could use the device and the technology. But we looked at all of that. I made myself familiar with it, Percy, as well. We looked at use cases that could be solved with that technology. And that's when we decided, okay, that's a new potential breakthrough technology that is coming out with a major player in the market that will very likely make some noise around it. And before that, all of that started, we made sure we have our, let's say, pilot code and things ready and use case ideas. And that's what we did. So we had a bit of a head start there. Plus a significant amount of knowledge, I'd say, primarily that came in primarily through Henrik and his PhD thesis. Yeah, and that then one thing came to the other. We hired a guy from that, so we set up the relationship to those two professors in a very close way. I got to know them as well. We found students, interns, but also we did some hires from that verbal computing program at the University of Bremen. So we were ready and able to set up everything that we needed quite quickly to be ready for, I'd say, a productive pilot things with those type of devices.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that was predicted, though? Because it sounds very careful and measured. Of course, the bootstrapping is a lot more of a careful approach than some of the other VC backed. I mean, certainly if you look at some of the American businesses, how much of that was kind of planned, and how much of it did it sort of happen kind of organically? I mean, it sounds like you were in the right place at the right time. You know, you write Google Glass. That was a very big thing. I was in the industry at the time. I mean, our paths must have crossed many, many times because I was at Copen back in 2013, building the GoldenEye device. But I mean, how much of that was planned? Because you say you hired your first person. What was that, 2013, 2014, when you hired your first person?
Yeah, we were still doing consulting. So I think the first the first person we hired right from university, that was already in 2012. That was one person who extended our consulting team of three. So the three co-founders plus that one person. He helped us also then. We were at one point or not at one point, for more than 2 years, I think all three of us had 100% engagement at a very large German software player, consulting engagement. So we had a good amount of money from that and needed some support to try out those ideas, else we would have been stuck in consulting forever, potentially. So that was our first hire, but then our next, and then we hired then in 2013, end of 2013, beginning of 2014, when this idea about verbal computing became very concrete, we started to hire interns from the verbal computing program in Bremen, so computer science students, hired them as interns, and then I'd say shortly before the launch of Google Glass, we hired someone who just finished his PhD, also in the area of verbal computing, and his PhD thesis was about order picking. And he did a nice study at Daimler as one of his PhD customers. Had some very nice numbers from that, similar to the ones that Henrik had from several years ago. So the numbers were amazing. 25 measured as scientifically measured 20, 25, 30% performance improvement for that use case, for other use cases. So that was very promising. I would say beginning of 2014, we started to double down on that idea. So at that point, we started to spend a good portion of our consulting revenue into hiring people, into building up that software. So we didn't have any external money until call it Series A, which was so we didn't have any seed money and so on, and that was July 2016. So 3.5 years after we started spending money on that topic. But we invested quite significantly from that consulting money. As I talked earlier about those consulting companies making a lot of money with you as a young consultant. Now, if you found your own consulting company, you cannot get the same daily rate. But when you're only shortly out of a strategy consulting company, you still can get quite a decent daily rate.
Sure.
And so you can make good money, which we then reinvested. A good part of it, then later on we reinvested into hiring people and setting up that business.
So you say that you didn't go after seed, you went straight to round A, and it makes total sense the way you describe it as to why you did that. Do you think that if you had have taken seed money back then, would the outcome have been any different? Or, I mean, what happened in the boardroom? You know, because that I'm assuming you would have had the conversation, right, about should we do seed, should we not do seed?
That conversation we actually didn't have. We have really had sufficient amount of money, and interestingly, in our mindset was not. I mean, I wouldn't say we stumbled into this whole thing. As said, there was some planning, probably less strategically planned than other startups. But we stepped into this. We came from consulting. We always had our mindset was always, okay, we need to set up a profitable business. I talked earlier, we wanted to move from providing our own services to some product things where the product makes the money and you don't have to work 60 hours a week anymore. Now, okay, that was maybe a stupid idea, because also with the product as a founder,
Yes.
so work didn't go down for a significant number of years. But the idea was always to build up that something in the product space. And coming from consulting, the idea was always to build up a profitable business. So at that point in time, we didn't have any founding in mind. So indeed, we actually didn't talk about it. No, at that point, we did not talk about seed, Series A. We also didn't have an exit in mind. We our mindset was around, okay, let's build up a significantly sized company with a nice running product that makes a good profit, and then we get that profit as our yearly payment. And hopefully eventually not as CXOs anymore, but hopefully at some point just as the owners of the business. That was the mindset when we set that up.
So what changed?
That was not fully ideal, but it had also because like we had to rearrange a bit the structure and so on, but that's too much details. Like later on, when we realized, okay, we are going into raising money and potential exit later on. But it also had significant benefits, because when that is your mindset, you are really making sure that you are building a product that fits to market needs as good as you possibly can. And you don't just build something because you think it fits to the market. You are essentially trying to sell before you even have started developing. That's the benefit. Specifically in the B2B world, I'd say B2C is probably significantly different, but in the
Hmm.
B2B world, I'd say that can work. Doesn't always work, obviously, but it can work and brings significant advantages also with it.
So you say that you entered Series A then, and that wasn't the plan. Series A was what, 2016? Is that right?
Yeah, July 2016.
Yeah. So what changed then? Starting a business and being profitable, self-sustaining, those are all good ambitions to have. What happened?
Yeah. In the course of that period, some of our competitors, like Upskill from the US, whom you also know, they had raised, they were called different at that point still. Cannot
Yeah.
recall the name at the moment.
Apex Labs.
Apex Labs. Yeah, exactly. APX Labs. But they had raised, I think, 50 million USD by then, by mid of July. That was one thing. That still didn't make us make to look for money. What then happened in addition was that you guys might still know the company Metaio, which was sold to Apple. And the two, that was a German company based in Munich. Thomas Alt was founder, one of the founders. But so they had only two investors before they exited to Apple, and that was Atlantic Bridge and Westcott. So that's a VC fund from Ireland and a family office from the US. Dallas area. Um, so and Cord Westcott, he was then looking for the next potential investment for him, and they successfully exited Metaio. So he kind of I don't know exactly how he found us, but obviously we were also a German company, also active in the AR space. Certainly one of the three global market leaders in that space, the only European-based class at work partner. So I think we had several unique USPs to our company attached at that point in time already, large customers, public references like DHL and so on. So he reached out to us and asked us if we're interested in in raising money and what actually our status is, because since we were not active in raising, there was nothing published about us in terms of who owns the company and so on. That's when we started thinking about it, and that was, I think, after the exit from Itaio. I think that was beginning of 2016 or so, and then like 3-4 months after he reached out, we did that Series A. We there was so it was a multitude of reasons. It was a bit by chance. But so why did we eventually decide to do it? Was two major factors. Our company was, I think we were 25 people at that point in time. And actually one of us, Percy, was still working end of 2015 at that consulting engagement. So we actively terminated that one after the other. Like first Henrik stepped out to lead the company, the development and so on. Then myself stepped out to lead the commercial area full time. Percy was still making money for us, but obviously that was only 1/3 of the money we made initially. And we had 25 people on the payroll. Some interns, some of those interns, but also some permanent full-time hires. And we had some nice revenue also from the smart glass business by then. But our run rate was at that point only in the beginning, it was like 2 years. Our run rate from the money we made and we had on the bank account versus the monthly salary payments, which is the primary payment you have. At that point, that run rate was down to 2 or 3 months, I think, roughly. So it became a bit critical. Yeah, obviously, we didn't have much money then in the bank account anymore. The money we made was sufficient, so we were profitable. But had that money, like, if we were not successful in selling 2-3 of those Ubimax deals to our customers, then a 2 months, 3 months run rate is quite low. So we decided that's becoming too risky, specifically for our employees, which we had super close and good relationships with, and we were a bit afraid of that if something bad happens, unforeseen bad, that we had to lay off and get rid of some of them, which we didn't want to risk. That was that was probably the main reason. The second reason was due to those major venture capital investments in our market at that point in time, like specifically in 2015, 2016. I mentioned Upskill earlier, but there were like 9, 10 other companies around that had raised 10 million plus at that point in time, and we had zero. It became a bit of a marketing issue for us as well, because then customers were looking at, well, guys, so why are they raising and are valued at whatever, 80 million? The valuation is not always completely known, and you guys do nothing in that area. So it became also a bit, not huge, but a bit of a marketing issue. That was the second reason, but the main reason was really we wanted to have a longer run rate. It was quite a funny story. Then we made that investment July 16, and then we had Then obviously the board meeting started and so on. All that typical venture capital stuff. We had great investors, by the way. They were really super, super supportive. But then, so we were profitable at that point in time, and we didn't have plans to become non-profitable. So that we had our yearly board meetings, and they were then the typical thing you do as an investor. They had money in the bank from that fund to reinvest in the Series B. And the typical thing you do is, okay, when will that Series B investment be? So they calculated every board meeting, and it was always like, okay, that's going to be in 20, 25 years from now. So we probably cannot hold that money for that long, because we continued to work profitably despite the money. So that shows, well, main reason was having more flexibility, being able to invest more proactively, but primarily having a longer run rate if something bad happens to the business, which fortunately for us never happened then. So nothing bad happened until the exit. Hence, we never really needed that money. We used it eventually to acquire a company then. That is when our run rate became much shorter again than in 2019.
It sounds very sensible. Like really, like profitable business, raising
Germany.
money, the investors pushing you to spend the money. That I
Somewhat
am not.
unheard of.
I'm not familiar with any of those stories. Wow, that's incredible. Do you think if they hadn't have approached you, that you would have not done the Series A, or do you think you would have done it anyway because of the other factors that you mentioned
I
with
think we
relation
would
to your
have done
runway?
it then anyway. Maybe a bit later then. That because they approached us, we were kind of okay with it. We came to terms quite quickly. If you go to the market, need to find someone actively. We didn't. I mean, we talked to a couple of other investors then to get an understanding of what the valuation can be, should be, and so on. But there were valuations out there in the market. So the primary valuation negotiation from us was, well, look at that competitor and the valuation that competitor had, look at their customers and revenue, look at our customers and revenue, which was from everything we could tell and everything that was publicly out there, we were leading the market there by quite a bit. Clear, we had to make revenue, so we were always on the hunt for customers. So the primary negotiation about the valuation at that point in time was really looking at the market. But yeah, I think due to that constantly shortening run rate, we and the need to invest, because then when you are 25 people and competitors are getting to 80, 90-ish people, at some point you can be as smart as you want with your development team, you will then at some point fall behind.
A lot of
So
what
I
you
think
just
we
said
would
though
have
is
taken
that
money anyway then at some point. Yeah.
there's you say that you're looking at the valuations, you're looking at your competitors. The business that I founded in 2015 was a very small Ubimax competitor, Interware. If I think back to that time, a number of the companies that Interware was looking at as competitors, not many of them are still around anymore. So even though they raised huge amounts of money, Interware didn't raise a huge amount of money either. Obviously, you guys successfully exited. A lot of those things that we were perhaps scared of didn't really come true, because I'm guessing they did raise a huge amount of money and then spent it on stupid things. I remember the first time I raised money, the CFO said to me, "Don't buy a chocolate fountain." And, you know, of
I think there
course,
were wrong expectations in the
yeah.
market. One of the key challenges was, I mean, a bit to our benefit, indeed, but there were market expectations out there that this market is gonna quadruple or by a factor of 10 within the course of the next 2 to 3 years. Like those were the expectations when Google Glass was launched, which was in 2014. The market barely developed, so it's still in 2017. I mean, it maybe had doubled from 2014. If even, I'm not even know, nobody has very concrete numbers there, but the market just developed so much slower than everybody expected. It still is. It's still developing, but so much slower that yeah, that there was no exit, no great exit potential at that point, because you need to have a certain number of customers, a certain number of revenue, and so on, or a very clearly proven market to get an exit at the valuation that you typically get for venture capital. Hence, you need, I mean, so I don't know the exact numbers, so but I think they were, I would think that, no, I'll not talk about concrete numbers, but there were clear, like, I mean, if you have raised 50 million, your valuation typically should be above 50 million. So I don't know if it's 100 million or whatnot, but pretty high valuation. And for that amount of money, companies only buy if the market is proven or the company has proven itself. Either or. And the market just didn't get to that point for a pretty long time. So that is beneficial to the ones, that's what I meant with lucky for us, for the ones who build up the company carefully, not those, I raise money, I hire 30 people, I'm getting to the next round, I need to lay off 10 before I get the next round, and so on. We were just constantly growing with the revenue, as the revenue was growing for our company. And the longer it then takes until the point in time of potential exits comes, the better it is if you have raised less money before.
For sure.
But if the market had developed faster, I'm quite sure that, not quite sure, but like the chance of upskill being acquired, for example, would have been higher, versus Ubimax. I think there are then, if you have a huge amount of venture capital early on versus none, you need to follow, or you typically follow, two different product strategies then. The one product strategy is you have a lot of money, hence you have a clear vision of the platform that you want to build. And you need to sell that also to your venture capital investments, that this is going to be the platform that will scale hugely. So you need that scale out message, how will I scale? And that's the platform, right? You build it once, you sell it a million of times, essentially. So when you then take the money, you build that platform, you almost have to, because your venture capital investors expect you to do that. So that's the platform approach. The great thing is you build what you eventually want and need to have from the get-go. So you don't code something which you need to throw away later. The risk is that you build something which the market eventually doesn't need. That's the big risk with that. And the longer the period in time is where you build the platform before you can make relevant revenue with it, the higher the risk is that you have built something that is not having a product market fit. Now, on the other side, if you don't have money, your strategy has to be an MVP strategy, minimum viable product. That's the only way for you to survive. So you need to build an MVP, sell it, build the next feature based on what your customers told you, sell it, and so on. So you constantly build, sell, you sell, or you sell, build sometimes also, right? Customers tell you what they need, you don't have it yet, so you sell it, then you build it and give it to your customers, and so on. So it's a much closer check if your product fits to the market needs. You have that almost every day if you go that route. That's two different routes, and that route is significantly slower to get to the ultimate platform that you always need to exit successfully, I'd claim. Because in that process, you build a significant amount of code that you need to rewrite later so that it fits to your platform. So in our case, we had kind of 3 MVPs that we had built that we then needed to put together on top of a platform, but that meant refactoring parts of the code. Yeah, two different strategies. I think I mentioned earlier, in the B2C space, you probably almost the only chance to succeed in most cases is to go for that platform from the get-go. In the B2B space, you can sell, depending on the market, you can sell MVPs, specifically if it's such a topic such high on the hype cycle as our topic, wearable computing, augmented reality, was at that point in time, then there is a good amount of money in the market of companies willing to spend for MVP type products.
Yeah.
When this echoes the conversations you and I have been having the last few weeks, Jan, you've joined my new startup as an advisor, and it's been really helpful hearing that and focusing on the MVP side, because so easy you can go big and think we're going to conquer the world and do 1,000,000 things and get 10,000 users. Actually, just solve one problem for one person. I know the code that we're writing today for this startup, we're going to have to throw away in 18 months or whatever. It is what it is, but let's land those early customers first. I think that's been a really good thing, and certainly the conversations that we've had have helped towards that. And it's, I mean, look, and you're the proof point. I mean, that's what you did. You successfully exited. Nobody can say it was the wrong strategy, because clearly it worked. It
It's
worked
one of the
out.
strategy that's working. I'm always
Yeah.
saying, look, that there are so many factors coming together, so you cannot say, look, those guys did it like that, I'm going to do it the same way and it will work. You, in any case, need some luck always, obviously.
For sure.
Like in our case, it would have been, I'm not sure if impossible, but significantly more difficult if the augmented reality wearable computing topic wasn't top of mind of everyone, meaning on the top of the hype cycle curve for 3 years roughly. That made it much easier, as said, to sell MVP type products. If you are trying to sell something which is not top of mind of people, that's going to be quite
Much
tricky.
harder.
So today it probably would need to be something AI related as top of the hype cycle curve, where people and companies are willing to spend money just to get familiar almost with the technology and to understand what they can do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Jan, just listening to your story there, the journey that you've gone on, the not taking the seed money, and building, bootstrapping it yourselves, it all sounds like the perfect scenario, that it was calm, collected, it just went on the journey slowly as you built the business. I'm pretty sure it wasn't, calm the whole way. Maybe can you expand on some of the tough times that you had, some of the difficult decisions that you might have had to come up with? Maybe touch on some of the mistakes you made along the way that you had to reverse back out of it and take things in a different direction.
Yeah, there are many tricky things along the way. Almost hard to, many of the tricky decisions came towards the end, shortly before the exit, actually. If I talk a bit about the journey, so I mentioned, okay, we did build up the company in the beginning. A huge amount of discussion is always, obviously, which solutions are we developing? How do we market them? Who do we hire? Do we need an experienced sales leader, or do we do that ourselves, and so on? I think one of talking about the things that didn't work out, I wouldn't necessarily say mistake. I think if you do it better, probably it could have worked. But for us, it didn't work to hire a very experienced, expensive sales leader who was proven in our solution area before, but it just didn't work out for us. So me as a non-sales guy, I was able to do a much better job selling that thing that was probably so close to my heart than our experienced sales leader that we hired and then needed to and we parted way in a mutual way, actually, but we parted ways again quite quickly. So that was one of the things that didn't work out. I think one of the key learnings for me is in such an specifically when I'm talking again about the MVP thing, when you need to sometimes sell features that are not there yet. But when you do that, you need to make sure that the features you sell still match with your product vision and roadmap somehow, because obviously sellers, when they promise everything, they might do 1 or 2 successful sales, but then your complete engineering department is blocked and your product doesn't improve anymore. So that's a super thin line, and when you have 2 distinctly different roles sales leader and engineering leader. And as a sales leader, you are measured and responsible to bring in numbers this year. That makes it very tricky for an externally hired sales leader to find that right thin line between selling features that are not there, but not selling stuff which we actually never can reuse again for other customers. And I think as a founder, you are in a significantly better position to do that successfully because you have that company target in your mind and not the dedicated sales target or dedicated product engineering target. So I think you have an unfair advantage over external hires. And for us, it didn't work to hire external people. Eventually, we promoted internal sales managers to sales leaders, but I always played a significant role myself in those sales engagements, as did Henrik and Percy. Henrik is our CEO. Percy was relocating to the Americas, to the US, and was essentially having my role, the commercial role for the Americas, building
It's
up.
funny that you say that you're not the sales guy, because I when you were introduced to me and when we spoke properly the first time, maybe a month, 2 months ago, you were introduced to me as the sales brain behind Ubimax.
Okay, well, I'm talking now 10 years ago, right?
No, of course, and that's
2014 when we started that company. I had never sold anything before. I was sold as a consultant myself. I had never sold anything before. So yeah, now I have a 10-year career in sales. Now I'm a
good.
bit better.
Good.
But as said, I think the statement still holds true. Hiring an external one who purely has sales targets is tricky in such an MVP approach specifically, because it can kill your whole company if you sell features that you will only be able to use for that one customer, no matter how large the deal size is. But that blocks your small engineering department in a startup for half a year or a year. Hence, after that, your sales team cannot sell anything anymore. You are purely doing that's like a consulting gig then for that one customer, but your company is blocked for that period in time, and that may not happen. So you can only sell features. Maybe you don't have them yet and you need to develop them, but it needs to be features, or you need to change so the customer tells you what he needs. In most cases, my experience, that would have been a pure customer development. If you have I also have a computer science background, besides my business background. So if you have some understanding of your product, your vision, your roadmap, you typically can turn what the customer needs. You can tell them, well, that's what you told me you need. What you actually need, or what would also work for you is that. It would work even better for you. So why don't we do that? Which is a bit different, but the outcome in terms of how you can use it is the same or even better. And that small change leads to you being able to develop it in a way that you can make a product out of it versus customer specific development. And then that half a year turns into something super valuable, because then for a full half a year, you have a paid product development versus and your product continues significantly, and you can continue to sell what you are developing to other customers. So that makes the complete story completely different. So selling something, I mean, in that stage of the company requires such a super close alignment between and also target alignment between sales and engineering that is hard to achieve with external hires or people who don't own shares of the company.
That brings so many painful stories to me. The amount of time that I've lost because a salesperson has turned around to me and said, I must have, and I can think of 10 occasions when I was at RealWare and other companies where the sales team would come to me and say, engineering team, you must deliver these 5 features to, I'll never forget the phrase, unblock this sale. That is a phrase I must have heard every month at RealWare. And one of 2 things happened. It never went anywhere, but my team still built the thing. Or we did unblock that sale, and as you say, that feature was never used again. there's a number of things that I've built in my career that literally fall into those two buckets. It makes a lot of discipline, though. It requires a lot of discipline for the engineering team to be able to push back on that, because I think what you're describing is a unique founder situation. As a founder, you have a lot of power. With great power comes great responsibility. That power to check yourself, to say, as you say, for the customer, I know you're asking for that feature, but do you really need that? And I think the challenge with a bigger team is that founder energy is lost along the way. Because I think back, I was not a founder of RealWare, and the sales team that I was talking to, they were not founders of RealWare. They were just trying to do their job, and I was just trying to do my job. I think there's a challenge there to keep that, I don't know, that just discipline alive as the company gets bigger.
And I think brings us back to those venture capital rounds.
Yeah.
I think that motivation might also go down the fewer shares you own, and the more rounds you do, the less shares you own as a founder, and you almost become a hyper incentivized regular employee of the company who owns still the most shares of any employee of the company, but not something which is life changing. If you even potentially even not life changing if you sell the company for 500 million, because your shares are down to 0 point something percent. I mean, that's the extreme form, but with all the liquidation preference clauses and whatnot, that can very easily happen, right? So yeah, might go down due to that. Yeah, it's but motivation is a key thing. I mean, as a founder, you often work 60 hours a day. In our case, we all founded. We didn't have any kids when we founded the company 2011. Now, when we exited, we had altogether 5 kids. So along the way, we had 5 newborns, kind
Wow.
of, which obviously changes the personal situation significantly. We had, before the exit, we had a year of COVID behind us and another year or two before us. So homeschooling and all those things that came with it, we all know how it is, and that came on top of the typical 50, 60-hour work week, right? So it's also, I mean, it's a significant amount of stress that you have as a founder, no matter which route you go. If you have more money, you have a lot of discussions with investors, and you need to raise more money, which is a significant amount of work, due diligence work and whatnot. If you have less money, you have less due diligence, you can focus more of your effort on the company, but you also need to sell more to stay alive as a company. Yeah, so all of that is creates a significant amount of effort. And yes, I very well can understand that at some point you lose the drive. We talked about it, James. I cannot imagine at this point in time of my life. I don't know for how long, but at this point in time of my life, I couldn't envision founding my own company right now. That might change at some point, because the journey was so fulfilling and everything. Was not necessarily fulfilling, I have to say, then for my family, as a lot of time goes into the business and not into the family. So everything needs to come at the right time there.
I think we now lead up to the exit, which I think is what a lot of our listeners. I mean, we've only published one episode, so we only have one listener. I imagine. I mean, the exit is a huge discussion, and I think what I'd like to start with is just trying to understand, how did that door start to open? Because obviously the public announcement is at the very end of a long cycle, I assume, of conversations. How did that exit start to be planned, or
Yeah, I'll start with the timeline, which was quite retrospectively almost a funny timeline. But in September 2019, we acquired a business ourselves. Now it's confidential what the valuation was, but that took up some of the remaining money on our balance sheet, which but that was a process which took 2 or 3 weeks. The company, we didn't acquire a full company. We acquired, I'd say, half of a company, 20 something people, 24 people, I think it was. The other half was doing robotics, and that remained. So we acquired that without the founder. He stayed with the other business. We only did a week or so of due diligence, and so those are some confidential details. But we acquired that company, which made us needing to, besides integrating that company, we had to start raising the next round because our run rate was getting lower than since we invested money into that acquisition, which turned out to be great, that acquisition, but still. So we had that short due diligence. Then we immediately started to raise money. And then COVID hit. So that was then in February, COVID hit, or January 2020. I cannot recall exactly. I think it started a bit earlier, even first signs. But then in February, I think the first things started to close down in Germany, at least. February 2020. We were in the middle of, or in the finalization of the negotiation. The investor was Fielmann, German, family-owned glass company. So not smart glasses, regular glasses. Great conversations, great CEO, by the way. It's an amazing company. But he had to, so the notary, everything was done. Notary appointment, everything was done. I mean, the notary appointment was not conducted, but scheduled. And then all the glass stores had to shut down a week before our notary. No, actually Monday on the week where we had the notary appointment on Wednesday or Thursday or so. So then obviously the question was, okay, will he still invest when he in the same week has to shut down all his stores, and a significant possibility that he needs to lay off a huge amount of employees. Obviously, it's the German leading, Fielmann is the German, I think, European leading glass manufacturer. So that was significantly at risk. Luckily, it went through because it was for Fielmann a super strategic investment. In March then 2020, that was. That was the last week notaries were open in Germany. So 2 days later, they closed down all the notaries. So crazy times. I mean, you could still do remote appointments, but for an investment that size and so on, that would have been super, super tricky and delayed it significantly, if not completely canceled it. Okay, so we had that investment. We did, for obvious reasons, not announce it. So it was not possible at that point in time to announce it. So then there was another German company, TeamViewer, who is providing the key business of TeamViewer is to provide solutions to remotely support your workforce, or your customers, or anybody essentially. So remote service, PCs, laptops, any type of device, also machines. So their sales numbers went through the roof starting in January, February. They just went IPO a year before, and then their share price went through the roofs. Their sales numbers, revenues went through the roof. So a week after we had signed that notary agreement, Henrik, our CEO, received a phone call by the CEO of TeamViewer
Wow.
wanting to talk to us. Yeah, so that's how it started. Then we at Ubimax, we had our headquarters was in Bremen, where that university was with the verbal computing students. But I was not based there. I was living in Wiesbaden, close to Frankfurt Airport. So we had a small office at Frankfurt Airport, and nobody was in that office. Hence, we were able to meet. Like Percy was in the US, he was not able to travel, but Henrik and myself, a week after that phone call, Henrik and myself met Oliver and Stefan. Oliver was and still is the CEO of TeamViewer, Stefan, CFO of TeamViewer, both the management board. Essentially, we met them in person at our office, at our small office at Frankfurt Airport. was a great conversation, and then we, they told us, look, we are interested in acquiring you. That was end of March, beginning of April, something around that time frame. That was the first acquisition of TeamViewer that they ever did. And the acquisition was then July 17. So 3.5 months after the first phone call. Three and
Oh,
a
that's
half,
very short.
4 months. Yeah, it was that was the most intense time of my life, I have to say. So we had that Fielmann. Luckily, we had some stuff ready because just a week before we had finished the due diligence with Fielmann. So data room was there. But then for the acquisition, we needed more, obviously, and there was a lot of calculation, lots of discussions, and so on. So that was due diligence of Fielmann took, as said, that was like a 4 or 5 months thing overall. And then TeamViewer and other 3 things. So, and before that, we did our own acquisition. So that was a year in the middle of COVID, partly in the middle of COVID, which was somewhat crazy, yeah. With 2 little kids at home. Kids are, I think, the exact same age as your kids, James, 8 and 10 now, but at that point in time, that was 5 years ago, 3 and 5, 3 and 4. So yeah, that was an interesting time. Let's put it that way. But obviously, when you see the clear route and path to an exciting exit, you are more than happy to spend
Of course.
that time.
So how this might be confidential, so but how was the discussion with your investors about an acquisition just as you land the investment? I can imagine that's quite a strange situation to close a Series B and then to exit almost immediately.
Yeah, let's put it that way, we took some things to the negative of us in return for getting full decision to sell. So it was fully in our own hands. We did not need investor approval, which is very unusual.
Mhm.
It was also not part of our first Series A, but at Series B we were able to. So we took a couple of bullets. It was part of the negotiation, but that allowed us to eliminate the terms where investors have veto rights. We also still owned more than 75%. But that by itself, typically the contracts still include terms which give veto rights to investors. In this case, obviously there was a minimum price that they had to receive if we sell, but we could, as long as we gave them that money, they received more eventually, but as long as we gave them that money, they were not able to do anything against it. Now, so specifically Fielmann was not really happy, because as said, that was a super important strategic investment for them, which they wanted to hold for many years. Was also strategic for us. So we turned that into a partnership then between TeamViewer and Fielmann, but they received such a nice multiple in the course of, I'm not telling the number, but I think there are probably still some stories out there which have calculated that, but they received a nice multiple for holding shares of Ubimax for 4 months. It was quite
Brilliant.
Yeah, had they been a venture capital investor, they would have been extremely happy.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, they were crying to the bank. Okay, yeah.
So it was a bit of twofold, like the nice money for them, not the strategic idea obviously then didn't materialize.
Okay. What's interesting about the TeamViewer story is a year later, they then acquired Upskill. You were, I'm guessing, at that point then fully embedded. I mean, well, okay. let's just part the upskill thing for a second. How, following the acquisition then, which was middle of 2020, as you say, given that it was COVID as well, what was the transition like from everybody taking off an Ubimax hat and wearing a TeamViewer hat? How was that
That
like?
worked out quite nicely, actually. So they the the great thing was a week before we signed the acquisition agreement, a week before that, in Germany you were allowed to have to be in a room with other people again, at a distance of a meter, which allowed us to set up a kind of party type thing for that day when we did the acquisition. Of course, everybody always had a
Of
distance of
course.
at least a meter to everyone else. Yeah. But it was quite still, despite that, quite a party. So that was the first step, and the whole leadership. So Henrik and myself became part of the 10 people management board of TeamViewer immediately, or 11 people at that point, I think, and almost everyone else from the leadership team, everyone who was allowed to travel, was in Bremen on that day, welcoming everyone from Ubimax. And the day thereafter, the whole Ubimax team did fly to Göppingen, the headquarters of TeamViewer, or everybody who was willing to travel, which was almost the whole Ubimax team. So we flew down to the office, meeting many people that came back for the first time to the office, then also at TeamViewer. So that was a very nice start to that. But yes, obviously then doors closed again and so on. So it was very tricky culturally. Now we have a nice office in Bremen, or we had, and TeamViewer still has. So that office has continued, was even made better then. TeamViewer invested a lot. And as said before, so two from the three Ubimax founders, Henrik and myself. Percy was in the US, so that was a different story. He was kind of supporting the US TeamViewer US president, America's president, very closely. So all three of us had leading positions also at TeamViewer, and those positions were not Ubimax AR focused, but they were immediately functionally focused. So Henrik was leading the product team for TeamViewer across all products. Myself, I was initially leading the solution delivery team, or I was setting it up and leading it across all products. And as said, Percy supporting the Americas president across all products. Now, obviously, we were also involved closely in the migration project, integration project, but from day number one, those were our roles as part of the 10 or 11 people management board of TeamViewer. I transitioned to leading EMEA sales then later on, also across all products, not just the traditional Ubimax products. So we were from day number one closely integrated. Incentives for employees were also there to stay. We had a great culture at Ubimax. We're able to keep a lot of employees at now Bremen is not the highest salary city in Germany, but we were able to we hired them as interns, then they transitioned to full-term hires, and then the exit to TeamViewer meant for most employees a significant salary jump also. So also some good things for the employees that came out of it, and also some incentives from the exit that made, I think, like 3-4 years later, there were still 70-80% of the Ubimax employees with the company. So that transition worked quite nicely.
That sounds like quite a nice, smooth transition. I think when we met for the first time, you were running the sales. Okay, so then a year later, though, the upskill transaction happened.
Yeah, that was in March 21, so yeah, 9 months later. We actually did kind of 3 acquisitions at TeamViewer. Upskill, then another 2 months later, Biscopic, a German company from Munich and is active in the 3D space. and then Picavi in 23, which was a company, also German company focused on picking. Yeah, so don't know how to put it, but I think that often happens. So I think it's important to know the market mechanics there. But when the first startup company in your space gets acquired by a large player, the market dynamics are, for obvious reasons, changing. There is all of a sudden significantly more money, or you all of a sudden have one player who was on level, maybe a little stronger, a little weaker, whatever, before that. But all of a sudden, that player becomes huge. I mean, Ubimax turned from, we were 100 people overall, I think six or seven sellers, 8 sellers, I cannot recall exactly. And that turns from one day to the other into the team I was leading later. At TeamViewer, I had 200 plus sales people just in EMEA, and then we have similar sized teams in APAC and Americas. So that changes the whole market dynamics from one day to the other, and makes it then pretty hard for the other companies to stay in the first to in their product doesn't turn worse from one day to the other, and also the product from the company that got acquired doesn't turn better from one day to the other. The opposite might be the case. It might become more complex than as part of a larger company. But the customer conversations are completely different. As a startup, when you sell something productively for business critical things, which was the solutions we sold and everybody else sold, one of the key selling points is, okay, will your solution still be there in 5 years from now? Because I'm now, as a customer, investing significantly into changing our business processes towards your product and your solution. Now, that question, we were from one day to the other able to answer with a clear yes, and by a magnitude of 100 better than every other company in the market, essentially. So that makes it much harder than for other companies. And it then also became, we were, as said, in the middle of COVID, so I think it became much harder to raise money, which put many of the existing companies, specifically the ones that had raised a lot, in a pretty tricky situation at that point in time. So for TeamViewer, those 3 follow-on acquisitions were kind of follow-on acquisitions. So the first one was the major acquisition, and then additional ones which brought some additional features, some additional skills, and some additional territory coverage to the market, great people that we acquired by that. But the market dynamics changed, from what I experienced, changed significantly after that acquisition. And I think that happens often. So our venture capital investors told us when they made the investment, look, and it was not the first potential exit discussion we had with TeamViewer. We had a couple before also. They told us, well, the problem is, even if you're not happy with the valuation, now with that valuation, we were happy, before that not. But they told us the tricky thing is, if you are not doing it and another one is doing it for that valuation, then you have not sold for the price you did not want to sell, but it will become very tricky for you when some of your key competitors now it's owned by a huge market player.
Interesting. Yeah.
So it's something to always have an eye on. So what happens, to be prepared for what happens once the first competitor gets bought. Yeah, the market dynamics are typically changing significantly thereafter.
Yeah, that's great
Market dynamics
advice.
means selling to customers, but it also means venture capital and exit options, all of those.
How did it change then from your side? Because obviously the mindset of, you were the sales guy, if you will, of Ubimax. You're now the sales guy of TeamViewer. The scale is completely different. You said going from 8 people to 200 people. How did that change you as a professional? Because you're no longer the founder. What did that mean for your kind of day to day, your thinking, because that's a pretty big change.
It was almost two roles. Then obviously we formally we had that. I had, for example, that EMEA sales role for the last 2 years at Team, for my last 2.5 years, or almost 3 years at TeamViewer. But when we did those acquisitions, for example, those were led by either Henrik, myself, or Percy. So the AR topics were still always discussed with us. We still had a significant word in there, as that two of us were in the management board where all the critical decisions were taken by TeamViewer. So it was quite, I think, let's put it that way, there are acquisitions where the day-to-day routine changes much, much more than it changed for us. So we were bought by a German company. We did not have to relocate. I'm still living at the same place I was living before the exit, Henrik as well. Now, Percy by now has relocated back to Germany, but he was also staying at the same place. So there was significant, and we were still we were not taking, but we were influencing and had 20% of the votes for the major decisions taken. So what changed? A very new experience for me. When I took that role at TeamViewer, the sales leadership role, I wasn't sure if, and I told Oliver when he asked me that I'm not sure if I'm able to do that. I had never done that before, obviously. It was quite successful journey. Everybody, including my boss, then quite happy with what I did, and quite sad. I think everybody from us, including myself, quite sad when I left. I left then at some point due to have more time for the family. The work that I did put in didn't change dramatically, I have to say. So that sales leadership role was then similar to the co-founder role in terms of effort. So at some point I had to take a bit more time for my health and my family. But anyway, the role itself was quite exciting. So I really enjoyed that experience. It was a completely new experience. My sales team was more than twice the size of the whole Ubimax team at the end when we exited. So that was super interesting. Great friendships, great a lot of things that I learned. So it was really an amazing time at TeamViewer, which is a great company. I was there for 4 years. We were bound to TeamViewer for 3 years. Well, I think I was there 4.5 years. So significantly longer than we had to stay according to the exit terms. Yeah, because we enjoyed the role and the tasks and everything that we had there.
That sounds really rare from people I know who have had what they call golden handcuffs. Normally they end sooner because for whatever reason the company and the relationship, it just doesn't quite fit. And it sounds like a really special situation that you were able to really enjoy yourself and go beyond that, and you weren't running for the door when those 3 years were up. I think a lot of people would want to be in that situation. So that sounds,
yeah, it was really a great circumstances. The other thing which was great, I think, which also led to the fact that many of the Ubimax team former Ubimax employees are still there, and ourselves stayed rather long, I'd say, is the Ubimax Frontline, which was the product of Ubimax, or the platform that we eventually built, is one of the 2/3 products that TeamViewer is offering on the market, right? So TeamViewer is not a Microsoft or Apple or whatever. So this product, Ubimax Frontline, now TeamViewer Frontline, including all the parts that were acquired from Upskill, Viscopic, and Picavi, all of that forms TeamViewer Frontline now today. That product is still there, and it's one of the 2 or 3, depending on how you count, products that TeamViewer is selling. So it makes up a relevant part of the revenue of TeamViewer and is strategically a very relevant part of what TeamViewer is offering to the market. And that's different. So it was never in question if this product stays, for example, and so on, which obviously always when you have those large giants acquiring a company, the question is, okay, will that product eventually survive or not? That was never a question, is not a question. It is a key product of of TeamViewer. As a matter of fact, there was just a new survey and study done where TeamViewer is for frontline worker software platforms, I think is the term of that study, is the very, very clear market leader, and that the underlying product is what originally was Ubimax Frontline, plus the additional features as said from upskill with Copic Picavi. But what was originally Ubimax Frontline, now TeamViewer Frontline, is globally the very clear market leader according to market studies. So that still makes me proud, makes us as co-founders proud, and is great to see that the journey, including many of our great employees, that journey continues and is not stopping, and also has not stopped, and I assume will not stop. So it was always, when you do it for that long, it becomes, you don't only want to be successful yourself, that becomes part of your baby. And you want that baby, you want to continue to see that baby grow, even if you're not responsible for it anymore day to day. And hopefully you want to see that baby to succeed eventually. Now, let's see how that overall market develops, which is still developing, probably still not at the stage where it was supposed to be 8 years ago, according to market study predictions. But it's still growing, it's not declining. So that market eventually will come. Now, will it be another 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years? We will see. But the vision, also you guys, as part of that market, also had that vision, still perfectly holds true and will materialize at some point. We will see when, but it will materialize. I'm 100% sure about that.
I'm sure it absolutely will. So, Jan, you've obviously wrapped up your time now with TeamViewer. What's next? Have you plans? Time with the family, obviously important. What's next for you in your journey?
Yeah, so roughly, my kids are 8 and 10 now, and yeah, I think I'm gonna actually 8 and 9 very soon, 8 and 10. But yeah, I think they will be in 3-4 years from now. They will probably not want to see me every day anymore. I don't know when that point in time will come. It's not there right now. We have some time to make up for from the past,
Yeah.
from their first 5 years here on this earth. That is at this point in time priority number one. Besides, I talked about the additional kilograms that I own at the moment in terms of weight compared to my professional time as a badminton player. So I need to take care a bit of my health. So I don't have a definite time schedule. There are things which I know that I will not do now, or also not in the next year. What I am doing right now, because it keeps me, if I enjoy it, is supporting a few startups, either officially or unofficially, both along their journey in different areas. I'm obviously continue to be very interested in that technology space, AR, AI, wearable computing. But I'm also very interested in renewable energy. So I'm also doing some advisory work in that space for a couple of startups. That's what I'm doing right now and enjoying. So I don't know for how long. If that will be for another. Actually, I'm enjoying it that much that I envision doing that advisory type of roles, hopefully forever. Uh, if and when I'm gonna get back to I think it will happen that I'm gonna get back to an operational role myself, either as a founder or as an employee. Both. I enjoyed both. If that happens in a year from now, or it will not happen now, if it happens in a year from now, or only in 3, 4, 5 years from now, I don't know at this point. Probably primarily depends on my kids, if I'm honest, and what they say to me.
Yes. Well, as somebody with older kids, my youngest turns 21 tomorrow, and I can empathize with that period of their young years where they do think you are the best and they want to spend as much time as possible. It does fade. They go off and spend time with their friends, but they do come back. Generally because of money, but they do come back and want to spend time with you, and they become lovely
What was
people.
the age when it stopped with your kids that they
Yeah.
wanted to spend as much time with you as possible?
Well, for the two girls, it was probably maybe 12, 13. My younger fella, he was probably about 14, 15. But then by the time he was 18, he realized that if he wanted to go and do some adventures, he needed me to pay for them. So he was quite happy to come and spend time with me then.
Yeah, so that might define a bit my
Yeah.
timeline as well, but
Yeah.
we'll see. As said, I'm actually enjoyed what I was doing. That journey at Ubimax will never come back. I really enjoyed it so much. I have to say specifically the first 3, 4 years were amazing. I mean, you hear those stories from startups, but we were indeed sitting when we sold the first large picking project. And we sold, I talked earlier about sometimes you need to sell some features that are not there, but on your roadmap, which we did in that case. And then some of the features, developing some of them took a bit longer. Some hardware issues with smart glasses came also on the way. So we went to the first rollout and almost nothing worked. So we were there for a week. Then we went back, and 2 weeks later, after working night and day with the whole 25 people team, everybody, including the non-developers, were there every day from 8 to 2, 3 a.m. in the morning again, and then back in the office at 8 or 9 for 2 weeks. But it was so much fun, and we developed so close relationships between everyone, between the founders, interns, and it was amazing. So those 3, 4 years were the business where you also could see then how the idea is eventually getting used productively by huge companies like DHL, Samsung, and so on. That was probably the best time. And I couldn't do it anymore. So, well, maybe when the kids are out of the house, but at the moment I couldn't do that. So because the time investment was even more significant than in the later phases of the startup. So I couldn't do it right now. But it was the best time in business-wise, the best time of my life. So.
Fantastic. Great to hear.
I think we probably need to wrap up now. Is there anything, any kind of parting message or anything you'd like to say to any aspiring founders? Jan, I mean, our listener, whoever they are, is starting a business, or there's lots of advice out there from people who haven't done it. What's the one bit of advice maybe you would have wanted to receive at the beginning? Or
I think eventually everybody needs to find their own way. So listen to as many experienced people as you can, but eventually find your own way. I think there is in the startup world, it's impossible to just copy and paste if you don't have a huge, crazy amount of money, or if that's not your business model, let's put it that way, to copy and paste. But I think everybody needs to find their own way that fits with their own skills, their own personality, their own family situation, their own and the specific market environment that you find for whatever you're trying to build. What has worked well for us is that we knew the space we're in, B2B, what we talked about. We did not for us, it was always we were striving to set up a profitable, successful business, and the venture capital things, the exit thing, and all of that was more a side thing compared to our what we considered as our key job and role as founders, which was to set up a profitable business. That worked for us. As said, depending on what you were trying to build, it's not always the right path, but it is one of the paths that can be successful. And as said, it's a path which was as an inspiring message, which I think gave just a couple of minutes ago. So it was that specifically that those 3, 4, 5 years in the beginning were the best part of my business life ever, and I think I will never be able to to experience that again, because I'm in a different family life phase now.
Hmm.
But it was the best part ever that I experienced as a business person, and I can just um, if you are up for founding something and your family situation allows for it, I can just encourage you to do it. It will be a lot of fun. Obviously, now this was successful. You need to also um, it that it's also always an option that it's not successful eventually. Then still make sure. I would still say, even if it had not been successful eventually, those 3 to 5 years in the beginning would have been the best business life I ever experienced. So even if it had not been eventually not been successful, those 3 to 5 years nobody can take away from you ever.
Yeah.
Hence, I can just encourage everyone to found your own business if you are interested and up for it.
Yeah, 100%. My first business failed when I was 21 or 22. But the years leading up to that were just fantastic. And I learned so much, so what it cost me in failing, I would have paid many times over to go and do a master's or something like that to learn the same stuff. So, I fully get that. Just if you want to found a company, go for it, and just, learn from others and try not to make the same mistakes.
Well, Jan, thank you so much. I'd love to invite you back for maybe a regular episode. We did talk about topics normally, and I think your insight on one of our future topics. I don't know if we've decided yet what our next episode is going to be. Owen, we normally decide mid-episode what it's going to be, but yeah, I would love to invite you back, and thank you for donating your time. It's a really fascinating story, and congratulations on the exit.
Yeah, well done.
Thanks for having me. It was really
Thank you very
fun
much.
to remind myself about those old times and go
It
through it
is.
again. Really enjoyed it. Thanks again for having me, and looking
Yes.
forward to talk and speak to you again soon.
Right, thanks very much, Jan.
Jan, thank you very much. Look after yourself.
See you soon. Bye.
Enjoy the time with the family. Let's jump it straight.
Okay, well, I don't know about you, but that was great. Really, really enjoyed it. Lots to learn. Some really, really great insights on that. What do you think was a key takeaway from your side?
I suppose the first thing that jumped out at me and was fascinating hearing where the Ubimax idea came from was the fact that they came together as a founding team first, and then they explored a number of different. First of all, they whiteboarded what was a quantity of ideas, and then experimented and tested a few of them before they figured out that the Ubimax business was the one to drive forward with. We always talk about having, as you're building your product, making sure you have product market fit. I love the idea of having the idea market fit to start with.
No, yeah, absolutely. I'm actually going to meet up with Jan in a few weeks, and I'd love to see if he can bring along maybe some of those ideas. It'd be great to look through them and see what didn't actually make the cut. On my side, I think obviously he talked about the timing, and AR was really taken off at that, and timing is of course just as important as the idea itself, because if it's the wrong time, then I think we talked about that on a previous episode. What's really interesting though is the exit and how it came about. I didn't know the story. You and I have known Jan for quite a while now, but to actually hear the story of how the exit came about, it was almost like I don't know, accidental. I mean, clearly it was a lot of hard work in the process, but just to have a call from Oliver Steele out of the blue, and then an exit so quickly after that. It was a few weeks, I think, that he said, really from start to finish. That's really quite impressive. So,
and I suppose for anybody in a startup today, the important lesson there is be open for the exit whenever it knocks on your door.
yeah, definitely.
All too often people go into a startup with a fixed idea. We're going to build this up for the next X number of years, and then we're going to IPO, or we're going to do a trade sale, or whatever it might be. But the exit might come along at a different time to your schedule, and just be open and ready to it.
Just be ready. Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe you it isn't the right time for you, but at least be open to looking at the details.
No, of course. Well, I think, our first guest on The Long Shortcut, that's definitely a success, 100%.
Absolutely.
We should absolutely find other people in our network, or anybody else who's listening who wants to be a guest on the podcast. We would be very welcome to have you. I guess next week, back to normal. We should probably decide what we're going to talk about next week. I'm not
Where's
sure
the fun in that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll just wing it as we always do. Very carefully planned winging. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, look, you've been listening to the Long Shortcut. Please like and subscribe. We're definitely available on YouTube and Spotify now. Apple Podcasts, are we there yet?
We are, and they're loading through today.
Fantastic. Apple Podcasts, that's excellent. Good stuff. So yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Thanks very much.
Take care, everybody.